Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me for the latest installment of the design research paper video. This time we are going to talk about sources. Now, sources are very important when we are creating our papers. Now, although this does say the revision process, it is true you do need to understand that for the revision process, you actually want to tackle the different types of resources that you're going to use before you get to this point. Now, why? When we talked about in our last video the importance of the thesis statement, we spoke about how that is that is the idea that is going to guide the rest of your paper. So everything is going to be based off that one sentence. However, when we talked about constructing a thesis statement, we needed to identify both claim and reason. So your sources are going to help you to develop your reasons as best as you possibly can. Now, with the infusion of technology, it is so much easier to gain information and access to different types of information. You have online journals, you have credible news sources that have websites, you have systems like ERIC and online libraries and catalogs in which you can find information. So the digital age has really helped us to spot information and gather information a lot easier and a lot less time. So that is the advantage. However, the disadvantage of these different informational outlets now is that sometimes we're not sure exactly which we should trust. With so many different types of sources out there, how do we identify exactly what we are going to use when we talk about research, especially when we're talking about research, because so much of what you write is based on credibility. So an English paper may be different because you can talk about different types of authors who have different subjective opinions, but when you create research, you want to be as objective as possible. So the information in which you want to use wants to be as credible and as objective as possible. So let's look a little closer to identify exactly what makes a source credible and the difference between non-credible and credible sources which you should use. Now, just a reminder, you need to have 6 different references and you need to have 12 citations from from the 6 references in total. So, you do not necessarily have to have 2 per reference, but you also want to be careful not to dominate one particular reference over another because it doesn't show balance in your argument. So, let's talk about this. Now, what exactly makes a source credible? Well, we have a couple different reasons which you can see here. The first is that it's based on facts that can be proven. Now, we always want to be careful with subjective information because it's just that, subjective. Whoever is giving you the information clearly has a bias or has an agenda, and the stats and facts and figures that can be used can be misleading or skewed. In fact, this is what we call a fallacy because although it may seem like the information is credible, if it's not factual, it shouldn't be used. It also should be based on statistical information. Many things in which we see and which we do is by trial and error. So when we add statistics to information, it helps us to see what is the outcome, either positive or negative. Third, the source is experienced in the field and has produced good results. I like to use the example of someone who's been in a field for a long time, whether it be a doctor, a lawyer, teacher, whatever the case is. Now, they have been in the field a certain amount of time and they are experienced. But what if they did not produce any good results? What if the lawyer in which you had lost a bunch of cases, or the doctor had many malpractice suits, or the teacher did not produce good statistical data for their principles? Can they really be considered a credible source? Well, to some extent that can be debated, but of course the person or the source that has the most positive data will only help in your argument. The source is educated in that field. That ties very similar to the last point. Someone needs to be very educated in the field in which they're talking about, so they know the ins and outs. They've been in it for a long time. They've seen both the good and bad, and they have pretty clear-cut ideas in which they can improve a situation. And the most important point is that the point of view is objective. Now, what do we mean by objective? Objective means that the person that's presenting this information has no bias, kind of like an arbitrator if you think about it. The main purpose of this person is to present the facts and the facts only. Now, that's not to say that the person may not have a feeling or a view one way or another, but they are allowing the person to make their own decision based on the information that's being presented. So you want to be very careful of statistics or people or transcripts, whatever you're going to use, where these people are using words like I think and I believe. A belief system is something that's part of what someone is foundational, so it has an opportunity to be biased, and someone saying I think can also show that they may be swayed. So you want to be careful with those either way. So let's talk about the different types of sources. So credible versus non-credible. Now we're going to talk about the difference between the two and why each one is credible and not credible. So let's start on the left-hand side with the credible. Credible, if you're going to use a website, and that seems to be the wave of the future, which is fine. Gone are the days when we used to sit in libraries and go through card catalogs or microfilms. So much of this information is really at our fingertips, and it would behoove us not to take advantage of this. So with that being said, let's look at this. So credible.org or .edu. Now we see websites have a lot of different web addresses, and the ending of the web address often indicates who is funding or who is promoting this website. So .org or .edu usually stands for organization or education. So the main purpose of these different types of websites is to put information out there. There you can see information that's either positively or negatively affects their or reflects their foundation, organization, whatever the case is. Their main point is to get information out to the person who is trying to obtain the information. There's no bias, there's no skews, simply for the purpose of getting information. We also talk about research-based books, books that have many different types of research in it, many people who have used the book, who are quoted themselves in the book, have a lot of data statistically that can verify the information that's being used in there. Journals and articles are also a great example. Usually primary sources, again, usually they are objective pieces. This does not have to necessarily be paper-based journals or articles. We can look online to see that have online journal databases, like I mentioned Eric earlier, and different colleges and universities also have their own different types of online journals and articles in which you can use. Experts in the topic or field, so those again who are very familiar with the topic or the field, but not just familiar with it, just have an in-depth knowledge of the ins and outs and how things work, both good and bad. And news sources that promote objectivity. So again, as we mentioned with the internet, there's a lot of different news sources as well. You have credible news sources, you have satirical news sources. You want to make sure that you stay with the ones that promote objectivity. There are some news sites which clearly promote some type of agenda, and those are the ones you want to stay away from. You want to make sure that they are credible and that they are presenting the most accurate argument they possibly can. So with that being said, let's now look at non-credible websites, or sources, excuse me. So the first one we'll start with is .com. Now the reason as to why .com falls under this list is because com stands for commercial, which means what? There are investors in this. So people who have .coms usually have some agenda in which they have. Usually, of course, this is not the case. There are anomalies, of course, but .com is usually commercial, which means that it's they make money off of the website in some way, shape, or form. So you want to be careful with those. Again, not completely ruling them out because there are examples, but you want to make sure that you kind of stay away from them on the whole. Wikipedia. Now, although Wikipedia is a .org, people must be very, very careful of Wikipedia. And the reason as to why is that Wikipedia can be altered without authorization. So many people, anyone actually, can just go into Wikipedia, log in or create some information, and they could upload information about something. Now, Wikipedia has been seen to have a lot of great sources in it, but there's also been opportunities or times where information has been inaccurate, listing people's deaths or places of origin or what they wrote or what they sang or what they composed. A lot of different ways in which we see in which it has been inaccurate. So you want to be very, very careful. I would actually advise you to completely stay away from Wikipedia for research-based products. Blogs. Now, blogs can be very, very entertaining if you follow them. There's some great ones on Tumblr or whatever blog space in which you may like to read. But the problems with blogs is that it's completely subjective. They cater to a specific audience, what they want to promote, whatever agenda in which they have. Now, when we use the term agenda, that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It just means that they have an idea or they have a focal point in which they're focusing on, and all the information in which they dispense is usually going to lean to that focal point, which doesn't give you a fair and balanced argument. It just makes the argument one-sided. Now, when you are trying to get people to understand something, the best type of arguments in which you can create are, of course, your claims, but also your counterclaims. You always want to show people that you are understanding or you are at least empathetic to their point of view, because if not, you have a great chance of turning people off, even when we're talking about research-based papers. So we want to be careful of that. And blogs, unfortunately, fall under that. So again, blogs are great reads. They can be very entertaining, very funny. They can be very serious, hard-hitting. It can be a lot of different things, but most times they are subjective, and you want to be mindful of that. And finally, magazines that appeal to a specific audience. Again, these magazines have a specific target audience, and what they write, what they produce, who they interview, what stats they put, everything is going to revolve around that specific audience. And although, again, it may be very entertaining, very informative read, it's not very good for research, because research-based pieces want to be as objective as possible and let the references speak for them. So, as we see here, there's a lot of different things in which you can use. There's a lot of different tools that are at your disposal, and hopefully now you have a more clear idea of what you can and what you cannot use, or what you should and what you should not use. All this will help you to write a more effective research paper.